Alright, here, let me get comfy. I feel like I always. Okay, first of all, I feel like we always have to address an elephant in the room for every voice memos episode. This episode looks a little different on video. And that's because I just totally forgot. Well, it's kind of a long story. It's a little bit boring, but basically, what was supposed to be uploaded for this episode of the podcast was an interview with one of my good friends, Brad. But I went through the audio and my roommates were having a party that night, so there was a lot of background noise. And then also, I had some like audio issues. I think it's the settings that I used, and so it was just a little bit weird. And it felt, I don't know, it felt like if I put that out, I'd feel a little bit bad about it. And the Voice Memos podcast, it's supposed to be chill. It's just like a person, sending you a voice memo. But at the same time, it was a little bit jank. So now I'm here. It is currently almost 10 p.m. I'm posting this in 2 hours, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, also totally forgot my camera because didn't think I'd be recording. So yeah, we got the photo booth set up. I thought it'd be kind of aesthetic. We might actually do this every week. I kind of like it. I don't know, feels a little different. But alas, welcome back to the weekly Voice Memos podcast. My name is Simon. I'm a full-time creator. I'm a sophomore college student, and I'm pretty excited for today's episode. I was sitting down thinking about, what can I talk about? What has transpired in the last few weeks of my life? And I think the most glaring, obvious thing is college ended. So I'm a sophomore, and my sophomore career, that feels a little bit wrong. But the school year ended, and we have a little bit of a different. I'm realizing a lot of people get out of school later than we do, but our school year starts early and ends early. So I had my last final, I think, 3 or 4 days ago, and it's been really nice. I've actually had a lot more time to work on creative things like the podcast, and in a way, it feels like I'd equate it to I was doing everything with these ankle weights on the whole year, which was going through school, having to study and pass the classes, whatnot. But now I feel a little more free in the creative endeavors, so I've been focusing on this video I've been editing for YouTube and just posting more short form stuff. It's been kind of fun, and of course a podcast. But yeah, I thought I'd go through kind of my whole experience with college. Maybe some of you guys are watching this who are currently in college or out of college, or I know probably the majority of you are either in college or just at the end of your high school. Again, careers is the only word that comes up. I feel like that's wrong, but I thought I'd give my 2 cents on my college experience, how it might be different from most people's, which it probably is, and kind of the things I've learned from that whole experience. But before that, of course, the set, hopefully this doesn't fall down this time. Honestly, I didn't even put new tape on it, so surely this won't fall. If you want to send me something we're still trying to fill up this area, P.O. Box 130, Dexter, Michigan, 48130. You can go ahead and send me something and I'll hang it up. But anyways, let's hop into kind of how my college journey began this year. I think it's a little bit different, first of all, because as I go through college, I think it's not necessarily my main focus and priority. Of course, the creative work and kind of developing myself as an artist has definitely come to the forefront. And because of that, I think my priorities are a little bit shifted. I think what I really wanted to get out of college was mostly just meeting new people and the social aspects, which were really nice. But at the same time, then it's does the price justify that? I'm not sure. But what also made my college experience a little different is that my freshman year was in 2020. So that was during COVID. And so it's a local university. It's 20 minutes away from me. So I went there for a few months, got kicked off campus because COVID, and it was kind of a lackluster experience. I met literally 2 friends within that time living in the dorms, and those are pretty good friends. I've caught up with them throughout the year, but at the same time, it was definitely not the average freshman year experience. And so because of that, and because the online stuff started to take off, I decided to take a gap year. And what transpired over that gap year was meeting a lot of creative friends, people in these creative fields, expanding my network, creating videos. And honestly, I think the most significant thing was Creator Camp. And building a creator events business. That's what Creator Camp was. And just focusing more on putting an emphasis on telling more meaningful stories online. At the beginning of my gap year, I was running a clothing brand called Keep It Wholesome and focusing on making TikToks. I'd grown to like 1 million followers on TikTok before then, during COVID. And so that was kind of where the gap year began. And throughout the gap year, my main focus was moving from TikTok to YouTube, starting more long form things like the Voice Memos pod. Um, and I'd say that went really well, but that also put me in a weird position where I remember my mindset going into the gap year was like, holy crap, all my friends are going back to college. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm staying at my parents' house. I'm a failure. I'm just making videos like I was in high school. Like nothing's changed. And I think that was really difficult for me because one, I was alone. I was completely alone at that time. And two, like it was just difficult to see any way forward for myself. I was like, oh, I love running this brand. I love creating content and telling my story, but that's where it kind of ends. There's no set roadmap. And so at the beginning of that gap year, there's a lot of uncertainty. And we'll get back to that. I feel like that kind of lives on both sides of the spectrum. But spent the gap year meeting a lot of cool people and developing this community outside of college. In a way, I had my college experience in a very unconventional way. I traveled a lot. I met up with people. I talked about the creator economy and making videos more than I should have. But at the same time, I feel like it was a moment, and I think that year I'm so grateful I took the gap year because I developed so much as just a person. And I think that's something rare that we don't necessarily place value, or we don't have a lot of time typically to just sit and think about who the type of person you are or the type of person you want to be. And I think the gap year afforded me that. And so I kind of went through that whole process figuring out who Simon is. And I came back to school and it was a little odd. I think what's nice about college, I feel like, is it's very powerful if you go in with an intention. So my intention for the year was to build a community. It's something I'd grown to love. And so when I got on campus, started a club called Camping Club, and just started meeting as many people as possible. I met some incredible people. We went on some trips. We organized a lot of stuff at the beginning of the year, which was really exciting. And there was that intention portion of it of like, hey, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go with an open mind, meet a bunch of people. I roomed with 5 random roommates, which typically doesn't end up well, but it ended up so well. I love them all to death. And so there was this almost like nervousness or excitement of the fact that I was headed into this like new chapter of my life. And in the same way, at the time, I'd equate it to when I was leaving for the gap year. I had this like anxiousness, like I'm doing something unconventional. And what's interesting is that same anxiety lived within me as I came back to school. And I was like, all my friends are creating videos and I'm here going back to school. And so that was kind of a funny parallel to see, but I digress. Essentially, as I went through the year, there are a lot of things I learned and a lot of things I learned about myself. And just a lot of things there's a lot to unpack, you know? I think it went by really fast in my opinion, which is like scary but also exciting. But I thought I'd lay out some of the things I learned throughout my college experience to hopefully help you guys navigate the whole world that is college. Let's hop into it. The first thing I realized pretty quickly is that it's very hard to stay in touch with your friends throughout college. I think every single year, especially this year for me, started out with like meeting a million different people and getting to know them and spending time with them and just like meeting people on a pretty shallow level, but within a wide breadth. So I probably met like hundreds of people within my first few months at college, and I knew them and I was chill with them. But what ends up happening is like you realistically can't stay in touch with them. I think that's something I had to learn the hard way. As I reflected on like the last year of being in school and meeting all these people, I realized like I know all these people, but I haven't spent a lot of time with them, which is pretty typical. People get busy, but that was kind of a sad thing because I feel like I'm the type of person where I do want to get to the core of these relationships and meet people in a more meaningful way. And so I think that was a really hard pill to swallow, especially recently as I reflected on the year. But I think that's the first thing to take away from college is you're going to meet a lot of different people and you have an opportunity to meet so many amazing individuals. But at the same time, you kind of naturally fall into your own silos of those that you just see often. And it's really hard to kind of put in that effort to stay in touch with everyone, and that's completely okay, right? I think maintaining relationships is hard because sometimes it feels a little forced, and I think there's something to be said about like really putting a lot of effort into relationships and like bridging that gap. But at the same time, a lot of times that isn't viable and everyone gets very busy. The second thing I learned throughout college was, at least in the classes I was in, it feels like, and this is not really a hot take, but I feel like I have to be careful because this is coming from my perspective, right? And like for context, I'm a business major and business school is easy and it's very qualitative and all that. But at the same time, I feel like you're not really there in most classes to actually learn. And it's more of just to like check the box, right? Which is kind of how it operates. We know that by now. Of course, there are outliers. Like if you're in like a philosophy class or entrepreneurship class you really love, a lot of times you will learn new things. Um, but at the same time, I knew what I was getting into when I decided to go back to school. But there were a lot of different classes where at the face of it, it just seemed like you weren't actually going to or needed to expect to learn anything, which was a little bit frustrating. And it made me realize that a lot of the learning that you're going to have throughout college or just in life in general is going to happen outside the classroom. I feel like, especially this past year, I did so many things and learned so much, but almost exclusively outside of the school environment. And I think there's a lot to say about like the things I'm working on, the people in the creative communities that kind of push me forward. But at the same time, at the end of the day, it's kind of up to you to learn the most about yourself, to progress as a person. I think a lot of times it becomes really hard in college to like find your own identity. I think about the gap year and the traveling I did and the late nights, like being anxious and overthinking my future or DMing people, meeting up with strangers. And it was that year that in that space that allowed me to be like, okay, who is Simon Kim? This is who Simon Kim is, and kind of find that self identity. But I realized while being in school and being in college, everything's kind of like go, go, go. And there's no real opportunity for introspection. And it's not programmed into the way college works to have those moments of self-realization and self-growth. It's kind of up to you to take that upon yourself to figure that out and ask yourself those hard questions of who are you? What type of person are you? What do you enjoy? What type of legacy do you want to leave? And all these more difficult questions that kind of aren't addressed. The closest class I would say to tackling that concept was the specific business class. It was called BA 200, and it wasn't a difficult class. I mean, granted, it's a business major class, but at the same time, like it tackled a lot of qualitative subjects, and I really enjoyed that, like how to be a better leader and all these things. And I think a lot of times, at least in the STEM field or in the business field, you won't necessarily come across those things. And so I think it's good to try to take classes that promote that self-discovery or that introspection, or just do that on your own and try to have as many new experiences as possible. And yeah, overall, I'd say, I don't know, I think a lot of the biggest decisions I feel now in my life are this side of me that's creative and trying to do this as a full-time job and doing all this, and it's starting to work out on a crash course with the traditional route and finishing school and all these different things. And I think there's a lot of questioning that still has to be done, and obviously there's a lot of introspection that has to be done there. But I think this year definitely hit me with that. I came into first semester. So for some context, um, at the school I go to, I go to the University of Michigan. I go to the business school there. And business schools typically, or at least Ross in general, which is the University of Michigan Business School, has a tendency of like, it's essentially a pipeline to Wall Street to become a consultant, an investment banker. And obviously, those aren't the only paths, but those are the most prevalent. They're the loudest. They're what everyone is kind of told to do. And not necessarily upfront told to do, but subconsciously, right? You hear your friends saying, like, hey, what are you recruiting for? What are you doing? Are you casing? Are you doing this? And what I realized is so scary about that is you're supposed to have your first internship your sophomore year summer. That's like the expectation, right? Whether it's, investment banking, consulting, whatnot, and all these different jobs. But no one really tells you to prepare for that. It's also very early, right? You're like 19 years old. You're still trying to figure things out. You chose a major that's going to decide the rest of your life at 18. And now you just all of a sudden you have to start recruiting, start doing the process. And it almost feels like college to me, at least that first semester, was like, do you know like how Mario, this is a funny analogy, but do you know how like in a Mario game or a 2D platformer, the screen like moves to the right and it kind of pushes you so you have to continue like playing. And the goal is like it's a platform. It moves from left to right and you have to get to like the castle to save Princess Peach, whatever. But if you just stand still, like you're going to die, right? You're going to lose the level because you aren't progressing moving forward. And that's almost what I feel like school became. At least in that first semester, it feels like this invisible force that's pushing you along, that's just like pushing you forward in this direction. And you really have no idea what you're doing. You're just standing here. You just arrived here on campus or you're a sophomore. And it's kind of just like shoving you in this direction. And you're like, what the heck? Like, I don't even know. What am I doing here? And it just keeps pushing you forward. And that's what I realized happens a lot is you have these predetermined directions that are set out and you're just kind of pushed towards them without having the time and the space to think on like, hey, what do I actually want to do? What type of person do I want to become? And I think I felt a lot of that first semester. You can see it in my YouTube video, why I decided to go back to college or why I went back to college. And I believe that's Wholesome Vlog 12. First semester, I was completely enamored by this idea of this is what I have to do. I have to go find this corporate job. I have to go recruit for these companies. I have to network. And it took an enormous amount of effort to just snap out of that and sit down. And a lot of this was through the creative communities and the work I was doing and the people I was meeting and my closest friends, building Creator Camp was like, okay, Simon, what are you actually falling in love with here? What are you spending most of your time doing here? What type of person are you? What matters to you? And kind of having to equip blinders and become more focused on where I belong and what would be best for me, which is weird to say because I think a lot of times on the outside people can look at what I'm doing and be like, of course Simon knows what he's doing, but at the same time I don't at all. I don't. Even like earlier this year it was really bad where I was getting pushed into these silos of thinking and what you should be doing and where college was pushing me, and I wasn't even thinking about what I actually love doing and what is feasible for me and what matters to me and what is authentic to me and what type of person do I want to become. And from the outside, it's like obvious. Oh, Simon's like on YouTube. He's doing this full time. He's working on these creator businesses. He's going to do something in the creative field. Like Simon's not going to be on Wall Street or whatnot. But to me, it was so impossible to see that. And I'm still questioning that decision every day. And I think a lot of first semester was dealing with that and that push and pull of where do I belong? What's best for me? And long story short, had to equip the blinders, went to creator camp second semester, and I had to pull out of these finance clubs. I had to leave these circles because at the end of the day, I had to listen to what I wanted deep inside. And so I think I'm more aligned on that path. It's scary, but we'll see where it takes me this summer, especially. And yeah, to me, it's more of a question of that second semester in this past 3 months that I've spent more invested in creative communities. We started a creative club on campus and try to push more of that forward. And so that's kind of like the things and the topics and how I went through college. I think there's a lot of themes of overworking myself that were a little bit difficult to deal with. Trying to find that balance between being a normal college student, having fun and partying and whatnot, but also balancing working on these things and not wanting to accomplish something great and wanting to push myself forward and be the best version of myself and create the best art that I can. There's this forever balance between those two. And so there are a lot of themes of that throughout the year. But I think the biggest thing that I realized is if you're in college or you're looking to go to college, if you're, privileged with that opportunity, I think it's almost like this cushion that you have that allows you to explore. And I really, really, really want to emphasize that you should explore things that aren't in the traditional space. I think the biggest thing college gave me was like this cushion of, oh, I don't need to necessarily support myself full time through creation. It gave me this bridge to be able to make the leap to YouTube and then make that work. And that was a massive privilege. And I'm very blessed to have that opportunity. But in that same way, like these are your 4 years, 3 years, whatever, to experiment and to figure out who you are and to not just look around you and see what people are doing, but to really invest more time in yourself. And now you have more freedom to go out and do that stuff right now without the expectations of you making a full-time salary, without the expectations of you having to take care of a family or something like that, right? Like there aren't many expectations. Like, yes, you can do good in school, but you have so much other time to just spend exploring and doing things that are authentic to you. So I'd really urge you to do that and pursue what feels right. And I feel like those are the main things I learned from college. I think a lot of it was community building and something that I learned through, of course, Creator Camp and moving forward with that. But overall, I think it's been a great year. And I think the biggest thing that I'm now kind of thinking about is where does this leave me for the next year? I kind of now have admitted to myself what I want to do for the rest of my life is something in the creative space. If not my own art, then maybe supporting someone else's or working in a creative industry or field. And that was a scary thing to admit to myself because I think growing up there was a lot of trauma or pressures based around school and this expectation. And so I'm getting there, but it kind of leaves the open-ended question of where am I going to end up next year and what am I going to do? And it's really interesting. It's an interesting time. I think I had a different experience than most people would have, but at the same time, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. Like, if you're going to college, if you're in college, what are you trying to get out of it? Are you enjoying your time? What do you think the point of it is? And where do you want to go? And I think it's such an intricate topic. I hate always seeing like someone like Gary Vee being like, you should drop out of college, blah, blah, blah. Or someone who's like very stringent on like, you should go to college, study this, because it's a very individual thing. And more definitely with the growth of the internet and all these subsidiary jobs to that, like there are definitely lots of alternative routes. And so, yeah, just want to open up the conversation to you guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode or listening to this episode of Voice Memos. We're almost at like 200 subscribers, which is like crazy, but I think that's awesome. It's been fun to do the YouTube videos for the podcast, but yeah, really appreciate it. Those are kind of my thoughts on college and reviewing my time in general. And yeah, as a creator, as a person, as a college student, it's all kind of mixed up there. So I think there are a lot of thoughts on that, but they're not fully formed yet. So yeah, just really appreciate you guys for watching the Memos podcast. Let me know what topics you guys want me to cover in the future. I think a lot of you guys want me to get more into the business side of being a creator. Maybe I could even break down how much money I make. And yeah, that could be interesting. But anyways, I love this space for dialogue, and I appreciate you guys for showing up each week. Much love. I'm going to edit this video and then go to bed. Love you guys. Send stuff to the PO box, and I'll catch you in the next memo.